Hey, Jason, how you doing? Hey, Branson, how you doing? Morning.
Sorry, Dennis. Good morning. I was taking a phone call right as I got on.
No problem. Just say hello. No big deal at all. All right. Let's give it a couple more minutes and see how we do here in our summer class. A lot of people going on vacations, all I can say. Good for them. I gotta check out your Etsy store is it Julian Feed and Seed Etsy store? Dees, are you there?
Yeah, man, I'm here. I'm up on Beach Mountain.
Okay, cool. I gotta check out your Etsy store is what I was saying.
Okay. Well, it's I'll send you a link.
Okay.
I'm gonna turn you guys down and just listen. We're up here in a crowd, but I'll check you out.
Okay, great. All right, I think I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Let's do this share screen stuff. Today we're gonna talk about mental health and entrepreneurship. I've had some experiences that were really surprising to me. One of them was
Well, I guess
a guy who had just sold his company for $348 million. He was 30 years old, UNC guy. And he told the story that when he got the call telling him that the sale was going to go through, he was on the floor so depressed he couldn't get up off the floor to deal with it. He was just so depressed, even though he had just made $348 million. And this is actually a trend in startups, believe it or not. And most of it comes, I think, from people who just move so fast in such a short period of time. I think that their mental side of their life is not really equipped for that kind of growth or that kind of change. You know, think about particularly like a young college student who magically makes a company worth $1 billion, and the year before they're eating ramen and living in a dive somewhere in a college town. So you can kind of see how rapid difference in a very short period of time can cause stress. So I have been exposed to it, and I wanted to show you a little bit about this subject that Techstars has put together, and it includes the actual founder of Techstars, who is really a great guy, Brad Feld. So we're going to take a look at what these guys have to say, and hopefully it's helpful to everybody here. Hopefully that's full screen. Okay, great.
Well, I would say I was a pretty typical sort of nerdy, precocious kid. You know, I grew up in Dallas, Texas. My dad's a doctor, my mom's an artist. Right, there was a sense of being successful was important, and education was important, learning was important. I had a pretty deep introvert streak, so I was very comfortable externally. I was very social and had plenty of friends, and hung out and did things. But I really liked being alone reading a book. When I graduated from high school, I went from Dallas to Boston, and I went to school at MIT.
I think one of the really beautiful things about being friends first is you build this level of trust. We really knew each other and knew each other in different contexts.
I knew her well as a friend, and I found her fascinating intellectually. She was, incredibly smart, but also across a very wide range of things.
One of the things that I remember so much about college was he worked harder than anybody. And at MIT, that's saying a lot because everybody's really achievement oriented. Everybody was the valedictorian of their class. Everybody had perfect SAT scores. And he still took twice the course load of the required course load and trained for a marathon and just really worked really, really hard. And I admired that. I admire a work ethic. So when you're friends and you admire a work ethic, that's one thing, and then in a relationship that can get to be too extreme. And we would bill 100-hour work weeks, which meant that all the administrative time and all the, sleeping time wasn't on that. But it was extreme. That was extreme.
On today's fundraising segment, we have Brad Feld.
Brad Feld,
the man who does not need an introduction.
We were very successful as a business, financially very successful. Anybody on the outside looking in would say, what's wrong with you? Like you got, you live in Boulder, Colorado, you got, nice house, you got a nice car, you got a great wife. It's easy to describe it at one level and hard at another. So the feeling for me of depression starts with what I could only describe as kind of a hole in my gut. It wasn't that I felt an emotion that was a negative emotion. I didn't feel sadness or sorrow, but it was almost the absence of joy. It's like I've got this thing missing. I want this essential element of existence I don't have in my current existence. And I'm worried I'm not going to have it again.
The real crisis moment was we were on vacation in Sedona, Arizona, and he was driving the rental car, and he said he was considering pulling into oncoming traffic. So a really serious suicidal ideation. And I made him stop the car, and we traded places, and I said, I know some things, and I've studied some things, and I've done some therapy, and I've done a lot of work, but this is way out of my league. And when we get back to Boston, you're going to get professional help.
I remember feeling periods of incredible anxiety, and I had incredible shame around the idea that I would see a psychiatrist, and incredible shame around the idea that I would take medication, incredible shame around the idea that I might actually acknowledge that I was depressed. And there were very few people that I could talk to about this. Fortunately, I could talk to Amy about it. I could talk to my business partner, Dave, who was, even though he didn't really know what to do with it at the time, was incredible in terms of just being a supportive friend and partner. And what Dave would do is he wouldn't say to me, do you want to go for a walk? He would find out when I had a free hour on my calendar. He'd poke his head in my office and say, let's go for a walk. And I'd look at my calendar, I'd see I had an hour available. I'd be like, great. And we'd go for a walk. And a lot of times we wouldn't even talk about anything. He wouldn't start a conversation. We'd just walk. And sometimes a conversation would emerge, and sometimes I'd start to talk about something, and he'd build off of it. But he didn't make the walk, he didn't make the hour that we do a loop be about me or fixing me or how am I doing or what do I need. It could turn into that, and sometimes it did, and sometimes we just walked for an hour. Even when I was in a really low point, it was an introduction and a reminder to me of something that might be good, right? That might feel like joy against this touch point. And so doing simple things like that are very powerful.
You have to take care of yourself as well. It's the put on your own oxygen mask first. And that's my friends, being outside in nature, watching the sunrise with my dogs, just really intense self-care. It's a gift for me to be strong and happy, even when he's really depressed. I think my path is to be a truth teller. And Brad is a truth teller. Trust the journey. It's gonna turn out okay. It's gonna turn out great, actually.
Okay, so I think what's important about that segment is I personally didn't go to college with everyone who finished first in their class and had perfect SATs. That was not my experience. But this is really apart from all of that, right? Everybody's a human. There's different experiences for different people. But here's a guy who obviously really worked really, really hard, and all of a sudden had to look and say, "Man, I've got a lot of problems," and that's awful scary for a high achiever who've really never been stopped. Really. So I think that's helpful in thinking about this, even though the circumstances maybe we can't relate to. The truth is, everyone is a human, and what this guy went through, I think many of us can relate to. And I think the opening up of accepting these issues or understanding that this can happen to you is a really important step. That when I was younger, people who admitted to stuff like this, you basically sent for the white coats, right, and send them off. Okay, that guy's falling off the log, and put the white coat on him and put him in a nut house or something. But the things are really changing now, because this is not as uncommon as many of us thought. Okay, here's another one I think you'll like.
Y me encontré con mi negra, que estaba bien re solita. Le dije a todo mi hija, no sabe cuánto la quiero. Yo soy un guapo sincero, que su amor le solicita. Por eso tan solo espero decir.
I've never been one to follow the same path as everybody else. I was always known as like the wild one. Ball of energy, a little sassy. I'm not afraid to take risks. In fact, I probably chase those types of adventures. So I'm originally from Colombia, South America, and I actually moved to the US when I was 6 years old. My whole family and I migrated here. My childhood's a little bit different because I grew up in a very different social class, I would say, as well. My parents just wanted a better life for us. The reason we moved to the US was actually for safety and security reasons. My grandmother was actually kidnapped when I was 5, and we spent about 8 months trying to get her back. We went a whole month actually before we knew where she was. And that was kind of the last straw for my dad and my family, as we needed to move. And it was really a matter of like having a better, brighter future. All of my siblings and I felt this feeling of we had to make our dad proud and make our mom proud, just because of everything they'd been through and everything that they had put themselves through just so that we could have a better life. Even since high school, like I was always the type of person that would stay up all night and study for tests because I had to get a good grade and make dad proud and all of that. When I moved to Denver, I met Kevin. We actually met at a bar. The first thing that really stood out to me was just how kind and generous he is. Truthfully, I fell in love with his heart first.
I remember hearing that she was going on a camping trip with my friends, and I had just met her a few weeks before. And so I packed up all my things real fast and dropped what I was doing on Saturday just to go on this camping trip to see her. She didn't have a backpack, and she was just carrying everything in her arms. But she did it with a smile, and she was laughing the whole time. Like, wow, this person is willing to do new things, even if they're beyond her comfort zone.
Kevin was there from day one. Everything really happened super fast. Like within that first year, I had met Kevin and I had met Jackie, who ended up being the co-founder at Revelar. People should have the right to feel safe. And with Revelar, you are now empowered to live your life to its fullest potential. At the time, it was just the two of us working on it, and We were kind of figuring it out from scratch. We were solely driven by passion, right? So we were, in our minds, like creating a product that, for lack of a better word, was supposed to save the world, right? Like, how do we keep people safe? We had people write in and tell us how important our product was. And I think that just made us fight harder, but also that led to a lot more stress. Yeah, there was a lot of pressure to not let people down. You know, there was definitely a lot of great things that came from it, but it did feel like I was a little bit like suffocating myself in a way. It felt like I had to keep going, like trapped a little bit. Sorry, you just made me like tear up. Sorry, you're right, I haven't processed. It's been still really hard. You know, I did lose friendships. I lost a lot of time that I could have had with people. But in that moment, I completely had prioritized the company and the mission and everything we stood for. And a lot of people say, right, like, don't take it so personally, but it's super hard because you just given so much to that company. So my co-founder was actually really good at it. She would look at me and be like, you're sick or you're tired, like go home, take a half day, like go rest, like go take care of yourself. But a lot of times, like, it's hard to catch those moments for yourself.
The work world started bleeding into the home life. I would say I felt very alone. All you really want to do is see the person you love, but you also know that that person is trying to start a business, save that business, save jobs. I just knew I hadn't seen Andrea, the real person inside of there, for quite a bit of time. That person had been sucked into the laptop.
And my husband actually looked at me and he closed my computer and he was like, you need to go to bed. Like, you look exhausted, you look like you're not well. And that was a pretty big wake-up call for me, right? Like, do I need to work this late? Like, how can I be with you if I'm not with you? In a lot of situations, I was there physically, but mentally, my head was always somewhere else.
We know we're supposed to take care of ourselves. We know we're supposed to work out. We know we're supposed to eat healthy. We know we're supposed to go on walks, do art. But it simply felt like there was never time to do those things because we would be letting someone down if we took time for ourselves.
Starting a company is not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. You know, make sure that it's something that you're passionate about. You still get stressed out, right? Like, it's life. Life is meant to be a little stressful. That's how you become a better person and how you get to know yourself better. When I compare myself to how I feel now versus back then, I was definitely overworked, overstressed. I've learned that now, right? Like, how important it is to actually spend time with the things that matter the most to you, so you can continue to be your authentic self without letting stress and burnout take over.
Hi, Ben.
I was born March 2nd, 1975 in Sioux City, Iowa. I was kind of a happy-go-lucky kid. And then my dad left. And after that, I started to get more quiet, more shy, and that kind of followed me throughout my childhood. So middle school, the anxiety really ratcheted up. There were fights daily, and I had kind of this disposition of, when I saw violence, it would make me sick to my stomach. I survived middle school and made it to high school and started to come a little bit more out of my shell and break out of the anxiety a little bit. I was heavily involved in things like band. I did start to play soccer, so I played on the high school soccer team. Yeah, music was kind of my thing. So we had different garage bands. I played bass because nobody else played bass. Everyone wanted to be a drummer or a guitar player. And I was like, oh, I can get a lot of playing time if I'm a bass player. Things really started to change for me, though, when I got to college.
And that's where I met Matt, was on the first day of college. We were in a small orientation group.
We were supposed to go around, use an alliterative term to introduce ourselves.
So I said, I don't know, I'm Jumpin' Janie, I guess. Even though I'm like super shy.
I couldn't quite see her. She was kind of hidden behind some other people. It got to me and I couldn't come up with anything, so I said, I'm Measly Matt.
And I'm like, who's that?
You know, we're supposed to say something that we're into, and so I said, I like to do art. And so I see this head poke around another person and say, what kind of art do you do?
And he said, oh, you wouldn't understand. I thought, like, this is so on, buddy.
Like my 18-year-old self, I just want to go back and smack him. Luckily, I didn't ruin it.
It was really like I met my best friend, and we both felt like we had been searching for this person the last 18 years of our life. And about a year and a half later is when we got married.
She is strong beyond belief. She is so incredibly compassionate. You know, if love was a currency, she'd be one of the richest people on the planet.
4 years into our marriage, I think it was, he started to withdraw. He no longer wanted to do anything, wanted to sleep. He started to self-medicate with alcohol.
So the anxiety got to the point where, you know, I was afraid to go places. You know, I'd say to Janie, oh, let's just stay in.
He started doing kind of like ritualistic things, locking the door differently, turning the water on and off.
The anxiety would kind of kick in, and then I would do a ritual to try to combat the anxiety. And it would work, but it was a temporary fix. Then when I was 25, I decided I wanted to get over my fear of heights, so I was going to go skydiving. The day of our jump, I'm super excited. I was playing music on my headphones, and I couldn't wait to jump. And we get to about 3,300 feet, and the instructor opens the door, and I'm the first one to jump. So I look out, and I look down at the ground, and think, there is no way I can do this. This terror came over me. As soon as I let go, my heart felt like it was going to explode, and I couldn't breathe. What I didn't know was I was having a panic attack while skydiving. Then about a week later, I'm at work, and I'm talking to one of my coworkers, and out of the blue, I have a panic attack. It feels exactly how I felt jumping out of the plane. I'm starting to notice I'm having at least one panic attack a week. And it gets to the point where I'm starting to have a panic attack a day. Then I'm having multiple panic attacks every day. My obsessive compulsive disorder gets really out of control because one is kind of feeding the other. So I'm developing more rituals. I notice, you know, like I can't get out of the shower unless I turn the knob off a certain way.
He didn't share a lot with me. He was very withdrawn, but he did share that he was like having some thoughts that were very concerning to him.
So what my brain would tell me to do is very violent things. And me being just who I am, someone who hates violence, it was probably the most disturbing thing for me. So 2 weeks before my 27th birthday, Janie comes to me and says, I'm pregnant. And then I really start to spiral out of control.
The day I told Matt, I guess I just imagined he would scoop me up and spin me around and it would be this super amazing time, like super special moment for us, and it wasn't. And I think that's the first time I realized there's something really wrong.
I wake up the next day. I shouldn't have gone to work, but I did. I drove myself there. I sat down at my desk, and it was a Friday, and a lot of people were coming with, you know, where are my projects? How, you know, is this going to be done next week? I was a graphic designer at the time. And I just stood up, turned around, and looked at my boss and said, I need to leave right now or I'm going to hurt someone. And she just gave me this blank stare. And she said, okay. So I walk out of the building and I call Janie and I said, I need you to meet me at the hospital.
He seemed really kind of numb and like a shell of himself. I really thought that they would take him away and he would never come back the same guy. But it was also like the best day of our lives because he was given a new chance.
The doctor who was there at the time said, "We're going to put you on the right medication, and we're going to monitor you the next few days. You're not going to spend the rest of your life here. You're going to get better." And that's the first time I had hope in a very long time. That alone was a huge weight that was lifted off of my shoulders. And 3 days later, I walked out of the hospital.
He was completely different the next day. He woke up with hope. There was like sparkle in his eyes that he hadn't had in years. He looked alive again.
So after the hospitalization, they set you up with a therapist and a psychiatrist. So mindfulness became a big part of how I got healthy, because through the act of meditation, sitting on a cushion, I could actually watch my thoughts. And through that process, I understood that my thoughts are not who I am. But if you just watch them passively and become an observer, they don't take control over you.
I got to witness firsthand all those layers he had been putting on himself to protect himself were starting to come off. He was cracking open and the light was shining out. And it was just really amazing.
It fundamentally changed who I am for the better. There is a stigma around mental illness, and we need to break that stigma. We need to understand, all of us together, that it's no different than having any other medical condition. It'll still bubble up. There's moments 17 years later that I still have anxiety, especially before I'm to go on stage and give a speech. But I've learned that I can channel that energy. I can change it from one of fear to one of excitement, because they're kind of the same. One of the most powerful gifts you can give to yourself is to get healthy, and it's okay to ask for help.
So one of the things that they're talking about here, the wife was talking about it, he just kind of cracked open and these layers came off. I think everybody deals with trauma in their life, and it's really a mistake to judge somebody else's trauma, whether it seemed minor from your perspective or seems major. It doesn't really matter. What matters is how the person adapts to that trauma. And in this case, the way this person, whether his father leaving or whatever it was, he basically just internalized it and never really dealt with it. The previous woman that was talking from Colombia, she started crying talking about this, and she said, "Yeah, you're right. I haven't really processed this." So everyone deals with trauma in a different way, and lots of the behaviors, whether it's alcohol or drugs or obsession in other ways, these are all attempting to mask the pain and mask the emotional side of this stuff. I think this is a really good example of somebody who came out the other side, hopefully more healthy and able to not be a victim of his own processes for dealing with trauma. Okay, the last part here is some professionals talking about this subject, which I think you'll find interesting.
I'm Dr. George Iliopoulos. I'm a psychiatrist.
Hi, my name's Jean Ross Marin. I'm a licensed psychologist.
My name is Janine Dianabaugh. I'm a psychologist. Entrepreneurs obviously are in a very kind of high-achieving, pressure-filled world.
And they do a fair amount of self-neglect sometimes when they're in the middle of all of that. And they keep plowing forward. They don't want to admit that there's something wrong going on.
Sometimes that's great because it inspires creativity and innovation, but sometimes it can lead to a tremendous amount of psychological stress that can accumulate and also lead to burnout. Burnout is related to anxiety and depression, but different. I think burnout is usually related to the workplace specifically, where there is this demand for work to produce, and resources kind of don't always meet the demand to be able to execute the product. So one can constantly feel behind, right? That's the essence of burnout. Now, a side effect of that burnout then, that's feeling like I can't keep up, can then be anxiety and depression. So it can kind of stem from the burnout.
There's a list of the top 5 reasons for disability. Depression is in the top 5. And, so that's right along with heart disease and diabetes. So this is a major cause of disability. 1 in 10 people will have depression in the past year. And the lifetime prevalence might be more like 20%. So 20% of people, 1 in 5, might have a major depression at some point in their life. So it's fairly common.
18.1% of adults have an anxiety disorder, and actually 33% of youth, so from ages 12 to 18, also have an anxiety disorder.
Stress and burnout can impact all areas of life. Some of the earliest signs are very kind of subtle, innocuous things like difficulty sleeping. And that could get normalized because many of us have difficulty sleeping at different times. But when it is chronic, pervasive, that is certainly a sign. Distracted or unable to really focus and concentrate to drive tasks to execution. Difficulty in interpersonal relationships. A lack of ease or even joy in relationships that maybe was present before.
In a depressive episode, you have, for a significant period of time, a depressed mood. You're sad, you're down in the dumps, you're irritable, you're anxious. And a big feature in depression is a word called anhedonia. Anhedonia is an inability to experience pleasure. And that's, hedonism is pleasure, anhedonia is without pleasure. And that's an important thing that humans need. It's what drives us forward, helps us to make decisions, go towards goals. And if nothing feels good, it can be really hard to push yourself forward. Depression can also be associated with difficulty with proper nutrition and eating. And some people just stop eating and lose a significant amount of weight. They'll complain about things like, I can't concentrate. I don't have the energy level that I used to have. Definitely a tendency to be really self-deprecating. I'm no good. I'm worthless. I can't do this. I might as well give up. Things like that can come up.
The difference between normal stress and anxiety is really about the level of impact. If it's interfering with your ability to live, love, laugh, and learn. There's all sorts of very, very physical symptoms. You feel like you need to run away or maybe fight, or you actually freeze. It's your body getting you ready for fight or flight. They have a lot of stomach aches or headaches. Or somebody might feel like they can't focus, they feel kind of jittery, they feel overwhelmed. Some people might have full-on panic attacks that literally feel like you're having a heart attack.
There really is stigma associated with mental health issues. We don't talk about things like this. You have to be tough and on top of things, and you can't show weakness or admit weakness at work. There
is no shame in being burnt out. I think there's such a cultural norm, particularly in the entrepreneurial community, of keep going. There's work to do. This isn't that big of a deal. I've got this, I can keep going. So I think it really is the minimization or denial. I think friends, family, partners are hesitant to intervene with someone for fear of coming across as judgmental. And so the partner or friend doesn't want to contribute to the stress by calling out the stress. So often it's a cycle that feeds upon itself, where if nobody's kind of talking about it, the person isn't also getting any help. All we want to do is invite balance. So rather than talk about how hard they're working, how they're never there, maybe we invite, I'd love to have lunch with you today. Is there any way you could meet me for an hour?
I think if you're genuine in your care and concern, I think that's that comes across, and that's what's honest. You're being honest. You're not being too intrusive. Trust your judgment. Trust yourself. If you're really worried about this person, especially if you're worried about safety, then it's important to share that responsibility. Talk to people around you. And sometimes you might even need to call the authorities if you're truly worried that you're not going to see that person the next day.
Because it is really helpful to people to feel like somebody cares about them. They're not alone, that you're normalizing it. Like you're approaching this like you would approach other things. Because this is not our standard practice, it kind of goes against social norms, and it feels like we're being intrusive or nosy, to remind yourself that it's actually helpful.
I think often the key is to admit that we're not perfect, that we might be struggling, and show vulnerability in that way, so that we can then actually replenish ourselves by admitting that. Then if we do that and we start rebalancing things, chances are we're gonna come back to our work life in even more of a powerful way. But oftentimes we have to first admit that what we might be doing isn't working.
Good things can come out of situations where people have been in really dark places. And, human history is just full of stories just like that. And you can be the next story like that. And if you find that you're really struggling, go get help and work on it, and you'll get better.
All right. Well, I'm certainly not implying that any of you guys are nuts and need to seek help. I just did want to, make this available and let you know that it's not uncommon for entrepreneurs, in particular, people who are really a lot of pressure on them, a lot of people depending on them, customers, employees, et cetera. Sometimes the pressure can be hard to handle. So I encourage all of you to reach out if I can help you in any way, or if you think you might need some help in this arena. ECU has a lot of resources in this space. I'm pretty close to the psychiatrist guys and all them. They're really good folks, and so that was the whole point of that. It's not accusing; it's just pointing out that this is not so unusual. So, anybody got anything for me before we go? Any reactions or thoughts?
No, it's great. Over the last year, I've been really stressed, and I've talked to somebody to deal with the stress, because it does sometimes, being in a small rural area like this and trying to do something with a business, it does get overwhelming. So sometimes you do get lost, like the guy says. You feel like I could kill everybody because there's so much on you. So I definitely, and I appreciate you like bringing that forward, because a lot of people, us especially as men, there's kind of a misconception about talking to the shrink. So I think it's great that you have that there in the class, that people know it's okay.
Oh, good. I'm glad it's helpful. None of us are Superman or Superwoman, so it helps to realize that you do have a network of people who can help and care, and it's not about judgment. It's about getting better. No one wants to live a life locked up in some kind of crazy emotional state where you can't enjoy anything. That's the biggest thing I hated that Ann had reading, or whatever the word he used to explain living without joy. It's kind of like when somebody said to Winston Churchill that we're going to close all the museums and art galleries because the Germans are bombing it. And his response was, well, what are we fighting for then? Just keep it all open. People need to keep living, even though things are really, really rough. So, well, I appreciate everybody. You just might make a note, and I'll get the schedule out here. Next Wednesday, there's not going to be class, but we will have it the other days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And I think that will be kind of the last week. If there's anything in particular you guys want to talk about, please, send me some suggestions. I have a few more things I want to be sure you get, but just to kind of give you a heads up on that. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.